Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We will start the meeting now. And I would like to thank you very much to be here today with all of us. I'm glad and proud to welcome you at this information and brokerage event on Societal Challenge 6, or otherwise known as Europe in a Changing World, Inclusive, Innovative and Reflective Societies. The event is co-organized by the European Commission services in charge of Societal Challenge 6 and the network Net for Society, composed of all national contact points in this thematic priority. I would like in particular to address our thankfulness to Mrs. Nina Brown, who is the coordinator of Net for Society, and who, with other members of the network, will participate to the today event and will ensure chairmanship in the afternoon session of brokerage. The event is composed of two parts of half a day, each one of them. In the morning from now until 1 o'clock, we will perform the information part with an impressive team of 11 colleagues from different services in charge of all call for proposals for the three main drivers. We will answer to your questions from 11 to 12 o'clock, and we will present the key points of the mid-term evaluation for Societal Challenge 6, as well as the report on social sciences and humanities integration in Horizon 2020. In the afternoon, Mrs. Nina Brown and her team from 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock will do the presentation of Net for Society brokerage meetings. Societal Challenge 6, and you know, supports social sciences and humanities research, not just for knowledge-driven research in the frame of each one of the scientific disciplines concerned, but with a holistic vision in order to understand identity and belonging to communities, European and Europe in the world. Our world is rapidly changing with several and simultaneous disruptive evolutions, which imposes redesign of policies and almost the entire gamut of our society's fundamental interests. Employment is heavily concerned, education, participation of citizens in the democratic governance of Europe, equity in distribution of richnesses, and combat for poverty and social exclusion, prevention of conflicts, discrimination, inequalities, and several other concerns. Research undertaken under Societal Challenge 6 will serve to policymakers in designing new policies. Research will also serve to understanding of new societal phenomena and situations in order to provide policy scenarios and recommendations. This is the policy frame under which the work program 2018-2020, the 3 last years of Horizon 2020, was established. Flexibility during the preparation of this working program is the driving force in order to better tackle some of the most important societal challenges Europe faces today, including the European positioning in the international scheme. Some 557 million euro will serve to activities under the 3 last years. The biggest part of this budget will be given to activities which will come out from call for proposals on selected topics. 3 drivers are promoted in the frame of this work program. The first applies to migration, where policy scenarios and recommendations will be challenged for the global and European governance of migration. The second one applied to human and social dynamics in the fourth industrial revolution. Here, several challenges will be addressed linked to the socioeconomic and cultural effects in Europe in a context of globalization and digitalization. Finally, governance for the future will finance research addressing foundations of democracy in key constitutional and institutional areas. My colleagues will provide for each one of these drivers and for each of the call for proposals and topics selected under Working Programme 2018-2020, information on content, and questions will be responded just after the presentations. In this meeting in the morning, we have a web streaming, and the link is available in Commission DGRTD, Social Sciences and Humanities website, and in the Net for Society website. The link is also valid for the video recording material and will remain available after the event. Finally, research executive agency colleagues, the REA, are present in the room, in particular coming from Unit REA B3, Inclusive, Innovative and Reflective Societies, the unit which is in charge of evaluation and management of the big majority of research proposals under Societal Challenge 6, and also colleagues from REA C3 Research Inquiry Service, and they will try to respond to your questions. I will try to be short and in time because we would like to use 1 hour, entire 1 hour for your questions and response. For this reason, I will call my 3 colleagues in charge of the presentations of the first call on migration, Mrs. Raffaella Greco-Toreguti, Mr. Patrick Burrell, and Mr. Georgios Papanagnou, to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marita. Welcome, all of you. Good morning. We are very pleased to welcome you to this day. I will go directly into call 1, migration. If you've read the text, I think that you have appreciated that the overall rationale is focusing on the whole cycle of migration, taking into account all the different dimensions, from the external dimension with the geopolitical role of the EU in the global framework of governing global international migration, to the aspects dealing with the integration of third country nationals into EU societies. What we're looking for is having recommendation for the global and European governance of migration. So what is the role also of the EU in the global context, in the attempt to have global system to govern and manage migration and refugees issues? All of this in the framework of the SDGs and of the Agenda 2030. We will see it slide by slide, topic by topic, looking at which are the specific targets and goals that we're really looking forward to give a contribution to. Also in a view of identifying innovative solution for the governance and for the integration aspect of migration, in a view of also valuing and maximizing, capitalizing on bottom-up citizen initiative that exist for the different aspect of the governance process. So from the very external till the very integration at local level dimension. We don't forget the very important issue that you have seen tackled in several work programs and also in several framework programs of research and innovation, which is the international protection of refugees and the management of forced displacement in a comparative perspective with other countries, with third countries that are facing very important issues like European countries are facing. Therefore, always try to keep in your mind the overall framework of the SDGs of the Agenda 2030, the comparative perspective, and the combination between the global governance, so the structures for governance, and also the actions at local level, the inclusion of citizens, of residents, inclusion of migrants in the perspective study, etc. as well. I think that we can proceed with slide number 1. We will proceed in numerical order, so the topics one by one as you find them in the work program, irrespective of their year of publication. So in this case, call number 1, Understanding Migration Mobility Patterns, is a research action to be funded in 2019. We expect to have 3 projects with a budget of around 3 million each. And here we really based our understanding for writing the topics on the outcomes of a very important conference that DG RTD organized in February 2016, Understanding the Challenge on Migration, where this concept of new geographies and new temporalities came up, meaning that countries that were traditionally considered like country of destination might today have become also country of transit or countries of origin, including the idea of changing temporalities. The migration trajectory is no longer, if it has ever been, no longer an easy one, no longer A to B trajectory. Status of migrants might change different times during the journey. So we really want to conceptualize the idea of producing scenarios, analysis, projections, understanding of patterns, taking into account this changing framework. Here it is very important to say that we really understand the topic with a strong scenario mapping, estimates, vision. We really hope that inclusion of National Statistic Institute will be foreseen, but not only. It can also have a very strong thematic focus. You have seen mentioned unaccompanied minors, minors with family, so you can tackle the issue from very different angles. Topic number 2 is towards global governance on migration, is again a research action to be funded in 2018. Call was opened on the 7th of November. The deadline is already in March 2018. Again, we expect 3 projects with an average budget of 3 million. And here, if you look at the box on your left-hand side, you see the expected impact. Here we really wish to have recommendations on how we can play this very important role of actors in the global governance. What is the role for Europe? We really want to see contribution to goals 10, 11 of the SDGs and their respective targets. So all the disciplines are called in to contribute. Here we really want to understand what is the role of international cooperation, international agencies, development aid in the light of last communications of the Commission as well, that really rethink and restructure the way the relation with third countries is conceived. And here as well, to not only think it on very huge and institutional terms, also when looking at the global governance, we really want to see what is the role of the citizens, what is the role of local initiatives, what is the role of what is proposed bottom-up. So governance to be really intended in its broad sense, not only what is structured from the institutional level, but also what is built bottom-up from the citizen level. For topic number 3, I kindly invite my colleague, Georgios.
Thanks, Rafaela. So topic number 3 is essentially focusing on 2 things. The one is the effects, social and economic effects of migration, and the other is the integration aspect. So effectively what we're looking for is to have a robust, comparative and exhaustive knowledge base on the effects of migration on different aspects of society and the economy. And then at the same time we're looking to explore the impact of integration policies and also what kind of policies work better, again, in different domains. And to complement this research angle with factors that can facilitate integration or that have been shown to work better, etc. This includes research work at both the macro and the more micro level, the local provision of services. And it is covers a wide array of disciplines. Effectively, we are looking to have a truly interdisciplinary topic and proposals. Again, we're looking to have 3 projects for about 3 million per project.
We can move to topic number 5. You can see here also we expect about 2 projects of the size, indicative size of 3 million. And this topic is about integration of children in school, in early childhood education and care, and in informal education settings. So not only formal education, but also. We talk here about children. In the text of the call, you see that we refer to the International Standard Classification of Education of UNESCO, ISCET 03. It means that you can include in the research early childhood education and care, primary education, lower secondary education, upper secondary education. The age range is 0-18. But also in the text, we specify that if relevant, you could also address education and training for those who arrive past the age of compulsory schooling. 3 elements should be taken into account in this topic. We talk about children, so all the important aspects related to diversity of children, gender, age, complexity of background, culture, languages, and other aspects, disabilities, for example, children rights, children well-being, and other aspects. We talk about education. This is also extremely broad. We could address policies, practices, the institutional frameworks, learning and teaching, innovative pedagogies, and also informal education settings. And then we have the migration aspects, and also these are several dimensions. You can address children with a migration background, refugees, unaccompanied minors, and so on. It is, so you have a lot of dimensions, many. You are not obliged to address. Sorry, we expect anyhow that you are able to address a broad range of those relevant aspects, so to have to build a comprehensive framework. It is also important to say that we expect an integrated approach with other policies, such as housing, healthcare, and other relevant frames, families, communities. There is already a lot of research existing on education, on migration, on children. It is important that you are able to go beyond the state of the art of the existing research toward innovation. And indeed, we would like to see in our projects a pilot component, if possible, and possibly also the involvement of the relevant stakeholders outside research from the very beginning. The idea for this topic is to see if we can have an additional topic in 2020 indeed for implementing innovative practices in schools and in formal and informal education. The aim of this topic is to advance effective practices for integrating migrant children. This is the aim. It should guide the preparation of the proposals. But also you see in the box here also to improve monitoring and data collection and to enhance synergies and cooperation among stakeholders. Would be good also to include a comparative perspective with experiences outside the European Union, if you find that those could be of help. Raffaella, would you like to add something on this topic? Then we move to the next one, topic 6.
Good morning. Good morning. This is topic number 6. This topic will run in 2018 and 2019. It's an innovation action, which means that we expect to have pilots. So the integration of migrants in many member states of the EU remains a challenge for both, for public authorities and local communities. ICT-enabled solution and toolkits for the implementation of inclusion policy by public administration may facilitate the management of integration of migrants. The challenge here is also to improve their autonomy and to make their life easy. So by analyzing available data about migrants, the public administration and the local authority may provide relevant information and easy access to public services. Taking decision on migration-related issue by the policymakers could be supported with data analytic and simulation tools. So an efficient management of migrants' integration requires clear understanding of their personal and family situation, including their legal status, origin, cultural background, skill, language, etc. So once this information is available to the public authority, it can benefit to the host countries and to the migrants. First, facilitating the management of migrant integration if needed are known. Secondly, to provide better and customized services. And last, have a more efficient integration strategy at local level. So here the expected impacts are that new and enhanced ICT solution and tools will facilitate the effort of public administration to manage the integration of migrants. It will also allow the development and deployment of necessary processes and services for the inclusion of migrants, and facilitate the communication and the access to services such as language, education, training, employment, welfare, and health. So as I said, we expect to have, it's an innovation action, so we expect to have a pilot. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Topic number 7. International protection of refugees in comparative perspective. You will see that topic, or you have seen already, the topic number 7 and topic number 8, the following one that we will see immediately, they mirror each other, they talk to each other. They both talk about protection, they both talk about refugees and displaced people. One, this one that we are focusing on now, more on a legalistic perspective, on more with a more and very strong legal orientation. The following one with a more socio-economic and cultural orientation. But yes, you have understood it right. We are talking about the same topic from 2 different angles. So here we really want to look at emerging international protection systems. We want to look at the European, the emerging European, or the attempt to reform the existing European in a global framework. So where are we going? What are the international protection systems that are emerging, and what are the arrangements the EU is taking with refugee regions and transit countries, arrangements in place, statements in place, agreements in place, between the EU and other countries for the management and looking for the management of refugees and displaced persons in a view of establishing new or reformed protection system, comparative assessment of existing legal responses to protection needs, always in a view of better protecting the needs and the rights of vulnerable groups from abuse, exploitation, violence, and discrimination. Here there is a very strong component and a very strong also gender component that you can include in this topic. How do we want to do so? We also want to do so taking into consideration emerging systems in third countries. This is why we have mentioned 4 countries in particular in this topic. It is obviously now not by chance that these countries are there and not others. These are countries that are either revising, either that have just revised, either that have a very strong legal framework for protection needs and rights of refugees, asylum seekers, and displaced persons. This topic is not strictly speaking, international cooperation flagged topic, meaning that for the eligibility of the consortia, it will not be requested that an international partner is involved, yet it is highly encouraged to involve one of these 4 countries in a comparative basis, with no commitment by the European Commission of covering the budget for these third country partners, but following the rules, the general rules of Horizon 2020 for inclusion of third countries in projects. Here, indeed, it would be relevant to include international organizations and practitioners that work in the field of the protection of refugees and displaced persons. Topic number 8, and we come to an end for the call on migration for 18 and 19. Sorry, again, on topic 7, I have forgotten. It is indeed a research action. Again, we expect to finance 3 topics for a budget of 3 million, for an average budget of 3 million each. Topic number 8, as said, we look at the same phenomenon from another angle, and it is more the angle of socio-economic and cultural impact of forced displacement. And here, yes, international cooperation is absolutely needed. It is a criterion for the eligibility of the proposal to have a third country included. We mention in the text that we encourage the inclusion of a Middle Eastern or African countries. This is not compulsory, it's just an indication. Indeed, there are other areas of the world that are of extreme interest in a comparative perspective when looking at addressing the challenge of forced displacement. Here we really want to look at reception and settlement strategies, impact on livelihood, both for those that are displaced and for the communities where settlements and camps and urban formal and informal settings are placed. We want to see the long-term socioeconomic dimension of mass displacements, both for those that are displaced, for the family left behind, for the community where mass displacement takes place. Again, we would like to have a focus on camps, on hosting areas, but also on unprotected and unprepared urban settings that receive massive amount of people for long-term protracted displacement period. We want to look at local integration, at development, at the dialogue between trust and distrust in the communities. We want to look again at international aid, international agencies, and development aid in these settings in the framework of the Agenda 2030, in the framework of the SDGs, and in particular in the framework of the Global Compact on Migration, and in particular on refugees. Here again, we really wish to have the gender component and the gender analysis very well highlighted in the topics. And this is out in 2018, and again, research actions where we hope to fund 3 projects for an average budget of 3 million. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Raffaella. We will close the first driver on migrations, and we will open the second one on socioeconomic and cultural transformations. We have 14 topics in call for proposals, and I have 7 of my colleagues from the 3 services in charge of these topics who will take the floor, starting by Zoltan Krasnai, who will provide you the policy frame and explanations on several topics. Zoltan.
Thank you very much, Maria. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Zoltan Krasnai from the Unit of Open and Inclusive Societies. Call 2 of the current work program is a rather complex general framework about the socio-economic and cultural transformations in the context of the 4th Industrial Revolution. We followed here the advice of our advisory group to have such a complex call that practically covers what we used to cover in separate calls. You remember of the previous work programs in this Societal Challenge 6. So usually we had a call on the inclusive part, one on the innovative part, one on the reflective part. So here it is a sort of general holistic view of the 3 fields, bringing together all 3 elements that we have in Societal Challenge 6. But I think the most important is to look into the topic text, and the general framework is more of a narrative, a general narrative about the different challenges linked to the rapid transformations of our societies, technology, and the impact on socioeconomic groups, on the society in general, and on culture. You will see that there is a very important cultural heritage element in this call. So that's why it will, we really hope that it will have a major contribution to the objectives and the legacy of the upcoming European Year of Cultural Heritage. That is the only thematic year of the current Commission under the presidency of Mr. Juncker. And we will also contribute with this call and several of the topics to the Sustainable Development Goals and also to many security aspects, the security focus area in Horizon 2020. Without going into more details about the general framework, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Yorgos, to present the first topic, and then we will go with the other topics as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoltan. The first topic is entitled Research for Inclusive Growth, Addressing the Socioeconomic Effects of Technological Transformations. So the topic looks to cover the issue of the effects of technological transformations on work, on employment, productivity, etc. And at the same time, it seeks to take into consideration the social aspect of these impacts and what kind of policies can help in order not only to address these challenges and to tackle some of the effects, but also to profit from them. In more detail, the research that we're looking to have should examine questions like the impact of technological transformations on the content of work, on employment levels, on skills and their content, how we can potentially adjust our training and education systems, what can the effects of these changes be on work health and safety. And on the other hand, it is important that we have results and evidence that concerns the social protection and social investment policies that will help us reap the benefits of the technological innovations in order to have not only greater productivity but also a more inclusive and cohesive economic growth. In this, again, the research could look into tax and benefit policies or explore what are the merits and pitfalls of a universal basic income can be. And in general, it can also have a historical perspective in order to assess how previous industrial revolutions or technological and industrial innovations impacted society and economy. The overall impact is to have a robust evidence base, but also to be able to point towards policies for greater cohesive growth and greater productivity.
Thank you very much, Yorgos. I would like to give the floor to Patrick for the second topic. Patrick?
Thank you, Zoltan. Yes, the second topic is also an ICT-related topic, transformative impact of disruptive technology in public services. It's a research and innovation action which will run during 2 years, in 2018 and 19, with a budget of 9 million and 7 million. We already have tried to have this kind of call in 2015 with the Euro 6 call, which was meeting new social needs by using emerging technology in public sector. At that time, blockchain, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and so on was not so high on the agenda. Today it is different, and the challenge of this topic is to assess the potential benefit and risks of using disruptive technology, but also to measure the social impacts and the impact on civil servants. So we need to understand the political and the social, economic, legal and cultural implication of the introduction of such disruptive technology. And finally, we have to see the acceptance if the introduction of disruptive technology is accepted by the public administration and by the citizens. So the scope is that we believe that the use of disruptive technology can be very beneficial, yet the real potential impact as such technology and the way they are disruptive the existing landscape is unknown. So that's the purpose of the call, is to look at the potential impact. It's the same for the potential impact on public servants. We are looking for a pilot with multidisciplinary partners, and even if it's a research and innovation action, we expect to have a pilot and to have the development of a business plan and a long-term sustainability. The expected impact, so the action should enable public authorities to develop pathway for the introduction of disruptive technology, enhancing knowledge on digital democracy, and developed new ways of providing public services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. It's very interesting. Let me give the floor to my colleague Basudeb, who was very much behind the topics and the coordination of this call. Basudeb, please.
Thank you very much, Sultan. So I'll first talk about topic 3, transformations 3. It's called Innovative Solutions for Inclusive and Sustainable Urban Environments. It has 2 parts. The first one is a coordination and support action, and the second one is a research and innovation action. The idea of the coordination and support action is to bring together recent research in this area covering FP7 and H2020 in order to be able to derive first of all, to derive the results, to have an assessment of the results, and also to provide policy advice. The essential idea behind this topic for both parts is the following. It's well known that urban spaces, urban agglomerations in a globalized world are important engines of growth. This has been widely done for the last 20 to 30 years in covering all social sciences. Now, in this, they're drivers of growth, but they're also creators or they drive inequalities, the different forms of inequalities, spatial, social, problems of segregation, problems of stratification. These arise because of these phenomena. So the idea is to bring together the existing body of research in the CSA it'll be called an urban research platform, and from that to derive policy results. The second part is a research and innovation action. Again, the research and innovation action also needs to build upon what has been done previously, which is substantive. I couldn't off-cuff say the number of projects, but I'd be surprised if there's less than at least 30 projects that have covered this over the in the existing part of H2020 and in FP7. So the idea would be to build on this, to create to propose new value added in trying to understand the drivers of inequality. As has been said several times, both in the topic in the topics on migration and in the part of transformations that you've seen so far, these new dynamics of inequality and growth are critical things to be studied. And the idea in these two is really to bring together all the technological, economic, and social innovation analysis that can be used to address these inequalities. So this is the principal driver. I think I've covered it in the time you wanted.
Thank you very much, Basudeb. Indeed, keeping the time with so many topics, it's quite difficult. So I already thank for your attention, because it's quite a difficult exercise that we are doing today. Now I give the floor back to myself. I will present a couple of projects, and we will go through of them quite rapidly. If we can have number 4. Thank you. Innovative approaches to urban and regional development through cultural tourism. We should not have to point out the importance of the tourism industry for Europe, and in many cases tourism is related to culture, whether it is in an urban context, in rural context, related to tangible or intangible parts of cultural heritage. However, according to our experts, there is a knowledge gap concerning the phenomenon of cultural heritage tourism, and we ask researchers and innovators to look into that research and innovation action. We would like to better understand the contribution of cultural tourism towards cultural Europeanization and development in Europe, and we would like to assess how cultural tourism affected the development of European regions and urban areas. The different policies should be analyzed, how effective they are, and we would like to ask the different consortia tabling proposals to deploy place-based and participatory approaches, and a good and representative European geographical coverage is also very important. As I've mentioned, it is a research and innovation action, having an overall budget of 9 million, giving the possibility to address, to give grants for 3 projects. And here, let me mention in brackets that we are trying to learn from the past, where in the field of culture especially, we had very, very low success rates. I think I don't have to point this out. You all know what kind of difficulties we had. I think we had the lowest success rate in whole Horizon 2020, sometimes well under 2%. So that's why we are trying to reduce the number of topics. We discussed that very much with member states, and increasing the available budget for each topic, giving better opportunities for more consortia. For the impacts, you can see that on the slide, we would like to have better policies, better tools, methods, and of course, a better understanding through data and better statistics. If we can move to the next slide, it is number 5, Cities as a platform for citizen-driven innovation. This is a coordination and support action. So I would like to point out to the importance of the stakeholder approach. So it is less research-driven, this sort of coordination and support actions. That's why we call it a platform. Its main objective is to bring together stakeholders, test ideas, talk through different opportunities, and to have some smaller pilots. For example, for engaging citizens for innovative solutions on social issues in urban spaces, to capture innovative practices, scaling up community-driven practices without losing participation and co-creation, and integrate underrepresented social groups, And the most important impacts we are looking for is scaling up innovation opportunities for citizens and to develop practices based on experimentation, living labs in designing cities. We are very aware of the size of the budget, so we know that it will not be a project that covers whole Europe and test everything in every big cities or small towns of the continent. So it should be really well designed to cover the multiple objectives of the topic. Number 6, inclusive and sustainable growth through culture and creative industries and the arts. For 2018, it is really symbolical for us to launch this topic during the European Year of Cultural Heritage. The importance of culture and creative industries and their resilience during crises were pointed out by research, and the whole issue is very high on the policy agenda at European level. I can mention a recent resolution of the European Parliament on the issue. This is once again a research and innovation action with 7.5 million euro available, possibly covering 3 projects. We would like to really improve the understanding of culture and creative industries, which is very much for the moment a theoretical construction. There is no internal cohesion. It's not like the steel industry or the automobile industry in Europe. So that's why the improvement of indicators when necessary is among the objectives. But we would like to go well beyond the statistical approach. We would like to give the opportunity for the research community to go into details that are not necessarily studied at a European scale, almost an anthropological view of the constituting elements of those industries and the communities who are working in that. So we propose to look into the specific skills and their importance, whether they are digital or artistic, traditional crafts, education and training, design and creativity. Also employment issues, the gender dimensions in CCIs, digitization, financing models, tax incentives, and IPR. We would like to have very clear policy recommendations, so the involvement of the different levels of policy making from the beginning is crucial. We would like a better mobilization and connection between stakeholders, an increase of the awareness of the importance of this industrial field, improve data and methods, and in our mind, we would like to look some impetus for a more cohesive European industrial policy for this field. The next one is number 7, and I would like to ask the pen holder for this topic, Monica, to present it.
Thank you. So this is a topic for 19, you see. I will present the research and innovation action, and my colleague from DG Connect, Alina, will present the coordination and support in action. You see that we expect to finance 3 projects of the size of about 3 million. Out of these, on the research action, I would like to say this is not about developing ICT tools for enhancing security and safety. It is really about understanding the impact of increasing use of ICT on children and young people. Therefore, we expect a real interdisciplinary projects here. We talk about long-term impact. This could be on the well-being of children and young people, on health, including brain development, on lifestyles, and also on skills and competencies, social competencies, skills for the labor market, etc. We talk about children and young people, and again, what it is very important here is to take into account the diversity, socioeconomical diversity that could explain new inequalities, and also that can explain, we know that according to the socioeconomical background, the quantity and quality of the use of ICT is different. Other diversity, gender, of course, and very important also age. Here we address children and young people in general, but clearly a 2-year-old baby and a teenager, they are not the same. So it is important to take into account the specificity of this. ICT, what kind of ICT? To do what? Where? In the family? In the education system? For leisure? Alone? With others? All these aspects have to be taken into account. So the aim here is to identify the risk factors and the resilience factors and to understand how to maximize the benefits of the use of ICT. And this clearly will inform policies and the regulation. And we expect also here a good geographical coverage. And I give the floor to Alina.
Okay, thank you. So the second part is coordination and support action. And as you already heard from the other actions of this type, this is about putting together resources. So it aims at the establishment of a pan-European platform that will bring together researchers from the member states and associated countries with the aim of developing a knowledge base and filling gaps into how children and young people behave and interact online and on the risks they are exposed to while online. So the proposals in this action should pay particular attention to the vulnerability of children and young people in the digital environment and propose solutions to protect them, while taking into consideration the cultural and gender-related issues. So through this platform, the researchers should really bring together the research already available, should fill gaps and build community, and should propose what should be done next. So this should create an evidence base and policy recommendations on how to really protect children and young people online. They should also address the emerging issues like rise of hate speech and radicalization, which are very sensitive these days. Well, as expected impacts, they should bring up explanatory models that will inform relevant stakeholders and practitioners on the long-term effects of ICT on the development of children and young people, should contribute to better regulation and should ensure safer and more beneficial use of digital technologies home and in the educational systems. They will promote also better collaboration between parents and schools and should collect statistical data to really fill the gaps. So if you wonder what we would like to have from this, it is not just another platform, but the platform that could really contribute to better protect minors online. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alina. We continue with topic 8, the societal value of culture and the impact of cultural policies in Europe, research and innovation giving the opportunity probably for 3 excellent projects to work. Here, the general idea behind the topic is that at least in the last 10 years, at least since the beginning of the crisis, most research about the importance of culture went into the economic dimensions, evaluating the contribution of culture, cultural industries, cultural policies to economic growth and job creation. But there is very promising research already in different institutions about other aspects of the societal value of culture. And we would like to give an impetus to those starting research directions in order to develop new perspectives and improve methodologies for capturing the wider societal value of culture. And here, the range of opportunities is wide from the importance of culture for communities, for personal well-being or mental health, and my list is certainly not exhaustive. We would like to ask the consortia to map the various forms of cultural engagement, assess the role of cultural participation as a source of well-being, and explain how cultural values are constructed in the age of social media, internet, and television across different socioeconomic groups. And there is a second dimension or second objective, general objective in this topic, and this is the assessment of the impact of cultural policies in Europe. So that is important to study the visions that underlie cultural policies, going into really actors levels, institutional and actors level, to understand that local, regional, national, or European level, what is in the mind of the policymakers, what are their goals, strategies, and what is the effectiveness of cultural policies and institutions. So it's quite a complex, but we really think it's a promising and breakthrough novel topic, and that we will have the corresponding impact. In topic number 9, if we may have it on the screen. Thank you very much, Monica. It is once again coordination and support action, a social platform on endangered cultural heritage and on illicit trafficking of cultural goods. The topic would contribute to the Security Union focus area of this work program of Horizon 2020. And this work, this creation of this coordination and support action is parallel to other legislative and law enforcement policies at EU level. For example, the preparation of a new directive on the import of cultural goods into Europe. So as a social platform, the main objective is to bring together the research community with public and private actors and policymakers, to map past and ongoing research, collect and promote best practices from Europe and beyond, and become a major European reference for transnational and interdisciplinary networking in this policy area. So as it was mentioned concerning another platform by Alina, this would like to become a reference point in the European research and policy framework. And we would like to have important impacts, very important policy impacts, but also for dissemination, advice, toolkits, and we would like to have recommendations and ideas for shaping the research agenda on endangered cultural heritage beyond Horizon 2020 on the basis of this platform. It will be also launched in the framework of the European Year of Cultural Heritage. Number 10 is missing on purpose because it is a topic for 2020. We only have a title, as it happens for topics for 2020, and we agreed with member states that we will sit together and we will discuss them again before they will be developed fully, to take into account social, economic, and policy developments. So I move to number 11. Collaborative approaches to cultural heritage for social cohesion. This is an ICT-intensive topic that contributes to the digital technologies focus area of the work program. Research and innovation action with possibly around 3 million euro for 3 projects. And here the main idea is to link culture, new digital ICT technologies, and a better integration of less privileged sociocultural groups. So really it is an opportunity for different stakeholders to work together, because in this societal challenge, as you might have experienced in the past, we are really trying to break the different silos, bring together the ICT community with the social sciences and humanities community, with educators, pedagogical approaches. So I think here again we have an excellent opportunity, and what will be developed here can really have the cultural tourist sector, heritage institutions, and it will really have an entrepreneurial objective as well. So we really hope that the outcome will foster diversity and social cohesion, and also give new tools, policies, and ideas for cultural institutions to further develop their audiences. The next topic number 12, once again contributes to the digital technologies focus area. It is an innovation action, meaning that the probably two projects that will be selected beyond the research aspects will be really focused on the innovation part with involvement of the different stakeholders, private, public stakeholders, entrepreneurs, and this idea of curation of digital assets and advanced digitization, it is really a continuation of a process. So if you look back into the past, that part of our reflective work programs started in 14-15 with the idea of better 3D digitalization. Then we moved in 16-17 towards the virtual museums ideas. So from digitalization of objects to a better presentation in virtual museums, and now how to deal with the digitized objects, how to link them, how to curate them, would really finish a sort of a process in the thinking and in the approach. Also the issue of linking together physically separated objects and sites, tangible and intangible heritage is very important, as now cultural institutions, museums are linking their collections through internet and digital opportunities. And here again, we would like to have an impact on diversity and social cohesion, the involvement. I think there is a problem in the slide. About the impacts, it is really more about the curation and to have new tools, new opportunities, new business opportunities. We kept here the impacts from the previous slide, so please disregard them. After topic 12, I would like to give the floor for the presentation of topic 13 to my colleague, Marnix.
Yes, thank you. So the title of this topic 13 is Using Big Data Approaches in Research and Innovation Policymaking. A few words on that. Why have we included this topic? Well, the very basics of the topic is the fact that as research and innovation policymakers, we need to base our policies, our new policies, revised policies, on solid and timely data. We need evidence, we need information about what works, what doesn't work to develop sound new policies. And what we're seeing more and more is that the typical official, let's say, data sources we use, and I'm talking about Eurostat, I'm talking about the OECD, the typical indicators they produce, do not provide us anymore with a full picture of the dynamics of current research and innovation systems. I mean, we are missing new aspects of innovation. The data they provide is not very timely. Data on R&I investment, for instance, typically has a 2-year lag. For patents, it's even more, and so on. So, I mean, those official data sources do not provide us with a sufficient picture anymore. Now, at the same time, an increasingly digitalized world, that should be, not work, on the slide, has the advantage that it creates additional, new, novel data sets, new sources of data that we can use to solve this problem. And that's what we call big data approaches. Some of the advantages of that is that they're widely and freely available. They provide for a fuller coverage of research and innovation aspects. They are more granular. We can go more in depth in our analysis, and very importantly, they're also more timely. We can actually, or we should be able to look at developments happening nearly in real time. So the objective of this topic and of the project, probably one project to be supported under this topic, is to exploit big data approaches to produce information on research and innovation activity, performance, but also outputs and or impacts, with a particular focus on, and we have mentioned 3 different aspects, getting more information on private research and innovation investments, public-private cooperation, and on technology diffusion. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation of the last topic. I'm sorry. I would like to give once again the floor to Bazudab for the presentation of the last topic in this call, transformation call. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoltan. I'll try to be quick. You'll see there's a certain connectivity between this topic and the preceding one. This topic was specifically designed at the request of DG ECFIN and Eurostat, which had an interest in addressing this problem. We talked about globalization. What is being observed is that as globalization progresses, there is a transition taking place, a demographic transition taking place in Europe. There's an aging of the population. Enormous technological advances are happening, and yet at the same time, there's a slowdown, a deceleration in the growth of productivity. It's not that productivity is not growing, it's growing, but it's growing less fast than the competitors. And also, all of this is becoming increasingly difficult to measure because of the fuzziness and the practical disappearance of boundaries or a large disappearance of boundaries because of globalization. So measuring national income, measuring productivity, measuring national accounts and its components is becoming increasingly difficult. This topic is supposed to address this problem and in fact try to provide important changes in the way we conceive of and measure growth, productivity and national income. So as companies trade with each other, not just within a country but right across the globe, this analysis of productivity becomes very difficult to measure. Part of it was raised in the previous questions in the previous topic that national income statistics cannot handle this, and hence the idea is to produce new research on this topic. So this is a large call involving 9 million euros with potentially three topics three projects that can be financed. In order to cover this entire gamut of problems and also to produce new data, new statistics that will help to elucidate these questions. From the design, you might feel this is a topic maybe uniquely designed for economists, but it's a very large topic covering experts of technology, of statistics, of course. There is a close possibility of working with Eurostat. And in fact, there's a lot of work that has been done on this. There was a big conference called Spintan a few months back over here. And so the existing work on which this topic needs to be based is already extremely large. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, colleagues. A very large thematic approach, very tight financial sharing of budget. We have the possibility still to take into consideration results of which will be produced to design the priorities of 2020. Demand is high. Let's go to the third and last driver which apply to governance. We have 13 topics for 2018-2019. We will not do the presentation as we did not provided it for the first two drivers for 2020 priorities. We have the flexibility. It is not still mature to speak about 2020 activities. I have 7 colleagues who will provide information for each one of the 13 topics. And my colleague Yuri Borgman probably will provide you a short overall view of this driver. Yuri.
Thank you, Marita. Good morning. As said, I will just briefly present the chapeau and a good range of the topics, and then a number of colleagues come in to present topics they have worked on. So, what is this call about? This call is intended to provide the evidence base, sound policy and technological options to facilitate adaptation of governance structures as needed. That is really important, and I would actually advise everybody intending to apply for any topic to bear that in mind. So we want an evidence base on which we can design policy and technological options, interventions, which facilitate the adaptation of governance structures if that is needed. So that should really be borne in mind. So the call engages with the very foundations of governance and democracy in key constitutional and institutional areas, such as trust, differentiation, social rights, and citizenship. It addresses societal challenges such as populism, polarization, and radicalization, and covers security defense as well as digital democracy and open innovation. As ever, international cooperation is invited or required as appropriate. So I move now to the first topic, trust and governance, which is earmarked for 2019 with a budget of 9 million, and we intend to support 3 projects, but as you all know, as the text says, it's not so prescriptive. So this type of topic is fundamental to the call, hence the first one, as trust is for governance. Why do we have this? Well, we appear to be witnessing decreasing trust in public and possibly also private institutions of governance, which manifests itself in various guises, such as low voter turnout in elections, populism with regard to the EU, of course, Euroscepticism and Brexit. So the challenge is to restore and improve trust as a basis for sustainable and legitimate governance. Proposals should reappraise definitions and approximations of trust and indeed trustworthiness. So what does it mean? Having due regard to the philosophical, ethical, and psychological foundations of these concepts, projects must address trust in the EU, the euro, political parties, and financial systems, and may consider trusts in markets, regulatory institutions, the media, as well as scientific expertise and institutions, fake news, etc. Proposals should investigate the relationship between trust on the one hand and inequalities, legitimacy, and quality of democracy on the other, and also correlations between trust and social inclusion. At a more abstract level, Chapeau-like, research must or should identify levels of trust which are necessary and conducive to stable, sustainable, and fair social relations and governance. Potential thresholds of decreasing levels of trust, i.e., sort of when it becomes a game changer, need to be identified. The role of civil society needs to be investigated. Research, experimental research should be performed if relevant, and scenarios on the consequence of further decreasing trust should also be engaged with. Projects are invited to draw on experiences from outside Europe when relevant. The impact is to enhance, of course, as ever, the knowledge base on trust, including the factors determining trust and changes in trust. And actions will seek to make a contribution to restore and improve trust and governance. The second topic goes in 2 parts. We have RIA, or hopefully 3, for 2018, and building on that in 2019, a CSA. Differentiation in European governance. Well, this is the Brexit topic in all but name. Yeah. Differentiation has, of course, gained prominence in the light of the Brexit discourses. However, it's not a new phenomenon, and we thought it's now very timely to study it in depth. It has become a very prominent feature of European integration since the 90s. We've seen their vertical differentiation, i.e. a variation in levels of centralization across policy fields, with the pillar structure being, of course, Maastricht pillar structure being the epitome of this. We've seen horizontal differentiation, so variation in territorial scope application of policy areas, with the Euro and Schengen being the most prominent examples. And since the Treaty of Amsterdam, we have the possibility of enhanced cooperation among a minimum of member states. So the big question is this variable geometry or Europe of multiple speeds or concentric circles, etc., a model for the future? And it's indeed, of course, was one of the 3 scenarios outlined in Juncker's white paper on the future of Europe. And of course, the fundamental underlying question is, given these multiple crises, there is doubt as to whether member states can want to continue on the same integrationist track. Hence, the challenge is to ascertain whether and how much differentiation is necessary, conducive sustainable, and acceptable. And all these four adjectives are essential and must be addressed. Very briefly, as to the scope for the RIA, of course, causes and effects of differentiation should be considered, as well as conditions under which they facilitate policy making and problem solving. Is differentiation a strategy or default scenario? Historical context should be taken into account in relation to previous experiences. The philosophical foundations need to be addressed, as well as ramifications of differentiation for narratives and identity and possibly citizenship for Europe. And a consideration should also be given to perspectives from regional and local authorities, which has not been done thus far. The CSA, which builds on this in 19, as said, should establish a network to support policy making on differentiation, advising on appropriate approaches to differentiation tendencies, and how to better anticipate and prepare future manifestation of these centrifugal forces, Brexits, or yeah. Okay. As to the impacts, we need a comprehensive knowledge base with scenarios and models, and improve the EU's capacity and resilience to deal with these centrifugal forces. And of course, the CSA should mobilize and link experts and stakeholders. Topic number 3. 418, populism and boosting civic and democratic engagement. It probably wouldn't surprise anybody that we have this topic. Doesn't need much explanation. So as the story goes, mainstream political parties are perceived as no longer addressing appropriately citizens' concerns. There's voter abstention and defection to populist parties, and we need to understand the causes and this turn to populism much better and the consequences for European democracies and indeed the European project as such. So we need a comprehensive analysis of populism, as well as philosophical, sociological, and cultural explanations. We need to understand whether and to what extent populism is tied up with negative orientations, anti-something, anti-globalization, anti-EU, anti-immigrants, anti-minorities, nativeness, nationalism. Or is this not necessarily the case? And here a look at outside Europe may be helpful, where perhaps we find examples of left-wing rather than right-wing populism. What are the relations between these two? There is a quite cryptic sentence in it, which I want to explain. We want projects to study whether and how populism is related to structural socioeconomic mutations or destabilizations of political economic paradigms. What do we mean with this? Well, the wider, basically, relations to inequalities and neoliberal narratives, the predominance with neoliberal narratives, marketization, financialization, globalization, etc. A lot of the material that was covered in the previous Reversing Inequalities call, actually. Of course, looking at the role of the media, in particular the social media, is needed. A framing of elitism in the media and elsewhere. The significance of charismatic leaders should also be considered. On a more positive spin, a central question is how the existing potential of particularly younger citizens to actually engage with public affairs, which we do measure in projects, how can that be harnessed, again, more positively for democratic governance? Impact, knowledge-based populism, of course, must be significantly enhanced. Indicators and scenarios should be developed to support policies and narrative construction. Now, for the fourth topic, I give the floor to my colleague, Jorgos.
Thank you. So the fourth topic is entitled Enhancing Social Rights and EU Citizenship. And the general background is to see how to tackle divergence in social outcomes and social rights in member states, and how these have contributed to socioeconomic shocks and how these can be avoided in the future. Also with a view to restoring trust to governance and leading to what the Commission calls upward convergence in social rights. At the same time, the other facet of this topic is to put all this data and reflection into understanding better what European social citizenship will be like, and what the content of that could be. So research should deliver results on how social rights were exercised in the wake of the crisis, and how the member states in the European Union played a role in supporting them and supporting citizens. It should look to contribute to the study and implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights. Also bolster and boost the statistical basis with a re-examination of the existing social policy indicators, or contributing to a re-examination and improvement where necessary, to examine whether the pitfalls and the merits of having greater harmonization in social policies across the EU. And as I said before, proposals should also explore conceptualizations and possible content of social citizenship that would go beyond what is customary understood by the term, which is mostly mobility within the EU. Ultimately, proposals could also examine the interplay between social rights and economic growth and inequality, also against the backdrop of a historical perspective. The impact is to provide recommendations of the exercise of social rights as part of the EU citizenship, to contribute to the agenda and policy work of the BSR, and to provide us with robust new indicators and statistics.
Okay, so now call governments 5, new forms of delivering public goods and inclusive public services. This topic is in two parts. There's a CSA which will be launched in 2018 for a budget of 1.5 million. And there's another part which is research and innovation action in 2019 with a budget of 8 million. So I will talk to you about more the research and innovation action, and then I will give the floor to my colleague for the CSA. Concerning the research and innovation action, this topic is in line with the vision paper that DG Connect, and more especially my unit eGov and Trust, has published in 2013. So already in 2013 we were thinking that the future of public services needed to have a multidisciplinary approach, and that a solution may be embracing what we call the join-up government, based on the principle of collaboration, transparency, and participation with the appropriate government framework. So such an open government model builds on open data, open services, and open decision. What we would like is to achieve the digital transformation of governments, and this transformation is based on an open collaboration and innovation platform supported by ICT, what we call government as a platform, and an open environment and ecosystem with a clear framework and guidelines for modular services, what we call government as a service, and this should be in accordance with the e-Government Action Plan 2016-2020. So to better deliver public services, public administration needs to regroup resources under common infrastructure at the EU level, and also enable participation of all relevant stakeholders. The proposals should develop and demonstrate the potential of sharing common services with different actors. Could it be public, private, or third sectors? Very important also is the implementation of the once only, the digital by default, and the user centricity principle that should be taken into account. And even if it's a research and innovation action, again, we expect the proposal to develop a business plan to ensure a long-term sustainability of a new governance model. And finally, we think that the action will contribute to establishing a culture of co-creation and co-delivery, transparency, and therefore reinforce the trust in the public institutions. Now I will give the floor to my colleague Alina for the CSA.
Yeah, thank you very much, Patrick. So the CSA, again, is an action aimed to support the creation of inclusive digital services, and it needs to identify gaps in the current accessibility solutions and establish related best practices to promote training, awareness raising, and capacity building. So opening up and connecting public data has an obvious advantage for all citizens and businesses. So to that aim, this action should provide all the needed elements to facilitate the migration of public administrations to a model where citizens are involved in all the different steps. So really that they can participate in the creation and deployment of these services. They should really contribute to establishing a culture of co-creation, co-delivery, transparency, accountability, and trustworthiness, as well as continuous consultation promoting overall digital accessibility. I know that these words look like a nice keywords put all together, but the role of this action is really to demonstrate that the open government approach has a very good role in reinforcing trust in public institutions. So another role of this action is to support the implementation of Web Accessibility Directive. This directive entered into force in December last year, and it is now being transposed by the member states. So it aims at making the websites and apps of public sector bodies accessible to people with disabilities. So again, more access to people, including people with disabilities. So again, this is a very important action, and even if probably only one project will be financed, we really hope that this will be the best and this will really contribute to achieve our aim. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Patrick. I'm now turning to topic number 6, again for 2018, trends and forward-looking scenarios in global governance. A budget of 6 million is foreseen, and we are intending to sponsor 2 projects. This responds to recent trends in nationalism, protectionism, etc. We might have been inspired by the US elections, for example. And the big question is, what are the consequences for global governance generally and for the institutions in particular? So we find ourselves with a set of global governance institutions, many of which have been created after World War II in response to World War II, and therefore for partly, some would say, considerably different purposes. So the challenge is to determine what shifts or changes in global governance and transnational governments are needed, and what are the effects of that for the EU as a global actor. So projects should assess contemporary and historical developments in key institutions such as UN, NATO, WTO, OSCE. It says EG in the text. It's not, strictly speaking, a must list. Yeah? But of course, we did put them in there for a reason, but it's certainly also not exhaustive, the list. Projects that choose to address NATO, there, of course, one would expect, although it's not as a must set in the text, but one would perhaps expect perspectives from Eastern Europe, perhaps the Baltics, to be brought in, possibly through partners. The challenges faced by global governance must be addressed, so representativeness, questions about this, legitimacy, diverging interests, trusts, and of course, difficulties in relation to implementation of agreements. And of course, the EU's role in these institutions processes must be studied in detail. Scenarios should be developed, also in relation to the implementation of the EU global strategy, of course, and the climate goals of the Paris Agreement and Sustainable Development Goals. NGOs, civil society, and policymakers should be involved to ensure mutual learning. and participation of international partners strategically targeted by the EU is encouraged. Impact, of course, we want knowledge and tools for navigating the emerging and future shifts in global and transnational governance, and enhance the preparedness, resilience, and capacity for developing globally coordinated strategies. Number 7 isn't there because it's for 2020. And now I give the floor to my colleague Michael from International Cooperation to introduce topic number 8.
Thank you. The purpose of this topic is to get a better understanding of the international dimension of open innovation, as you know, one of the key EU research and innovation policies. So the purpose is really for us to get a more solid evidence base for EU research and innovation policy making. But we don't want to have this only based on literature studies and different desk research type of activities. We want to have a solid evidence based on concrete cases of viability assessment projects undertaken between partners, innovation players in Europe and innovation players in new and emerging markets outside Europe. So in this analysis that we are asking the proposal to undertake, we would like to have answers to questions such as what are additional joint research and innovation activities that we could undertake between European and international players? What improvements of framework conditions could we foresee? What further research and innovation support services could we undertake in support of European innovation players when they want to internationalize? So we want the proposal to specify to us how they would like to provide such a regular in-depth analysis of the results of concrete cases. What are the indicators they would like to use to measure the impacts achieved? So this is the first part of the proposal that has to do such an in-depth analysis based on concrete cases. Now, the other task of the consortium submitting this proposal is to organize a series of open calls for these concrete assessment projects. So it means that the proposal should define what is the organizational process for this, what types of activities would be supported, what would be the criteria for awarding financial support, how are they going to monitor all of this and report of the results of the calls. So important to note here is that we are talking about a cascading of funds. We have on one hand funds going to the analysis, which is the main outcome, and we have funds going to these assessment projects through open calls for proposals, going to beneficiaries that will undertake these viability assessment projects, and the activities of these underlying projects would be market studies, partner search, partner networking, approaches for involving the users, and any other activities that would aim at overcoming any obstacles to market introduction and uptake. So we would like here to see an impact both at the level of the concrete assessment projects, many of them those you see on the left-hand side of the slide, but also to have a much better insight for us into these open innovation dimensions that we see when we look at international cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm now turning to topic number 10. 9 is again omitted as it is for 2020. So now topic number 10 for 19, drivers and context of violent extremism in the broader MENA region and the Balkans. A research and innovation action with a budget of 9 million, and we foresee to fund 3 projects. What is it about? Well, we have seen ethnic and religious strife, including civil wars in the Middle East and North Africa and the Balkans. And this could be described as a rise in violent extremism fueled by religious tensions, including fundamentalism. The challenge is to understand these phenomena and their drivers much, much better. This requires more empirical and interdisciplinary research, also specifically in relation to the impact this violent extremism in the MENA region and the Balkans has on Europe. So what is expected? Researchers should analyze the interplay between religion, politics, and identity, and this should include country and regional comparisons. The use of religious extremism to justify violent extremism needs to be studied from various perspectives, including narratives, authority figures, and leadership. The role of diasporas and community leaders needs to be considered, as well as a phenomenon of so-called foreign fighters. Proposals should, of course, also identify and analyze the effectiveness and usefulness of preventive measures, such as strengthening moderate voices, fostering education, promoting online media literacy, and countering radical propaganda. Proposals should involve relevant actors, such as policymakers, religious leaders, and representatives of civil society to ensure mutual learning and take-up of results. This is an INCO flagship, and proposals must include at least one participant from a third country relevant to the specific challenge, so either the Balkans or the MENA region. The impact is to improve the knowledge base on violent extremism and to ensure a step up in mutual learning between the EU and third countries in the light of these common challenges. I'm turning now to topic 11, again for 18, a CSA with a budget of 1.5 million, extreme ideologies and polarization. We included the CSA in recognition that extreme ideologies can lead to social disruption, distrust, open conflicts, and indeed crime and violence. There is a lot of research in place already, and the object of the CSA is to reappraise it and assemble it to a solid knowledge. We need a better understanding of how extreme ideologies and resultant behavior affect societal cohesion, and why and how extreme ideologies lead to societal polarization. So projects need to systematize the knowledge on the drivers of radical ideologies and also the links with other forms of polarizations, like socioeconomic inequality, stigmatization. Historic and cultural roots ought to be considered. Analysis of social, economic, education, culture, and youth policies, and initiatives set up by the EU national and local levels to counteract polarization need to be studied and evaluated. We expect an integral analytical framework as well as models and cross-national indicators on polarization to be developed. Best practices for mitigating and decreasing polarization should be identified, and a good variety of stakeholders, including civil societies, should be involved in the consortium. The action should equip actors, institutions and organizations with knowledge and tools for improved analysis, foresight, and interventions, and policies aimed at addressing polarization. Concrete solutions for abating antagonism are what we're looking for, and the action should also foster debates and expand commonalities among people. Okay, so now I'm calling upon my colleague Patrick to present topic number 12.
Thank you. So this is the last topic presented by DG Connect in this work program. This topic will be only open in 2019 and 2020 for a budget of 8 million euros. So basically with this topic, we would like to take advantage from the Commission initiative, which is a European Cloud Initiative. So what is this cloud initiative? The cloud initiative provides science, industry, and public authority with three things: a world-class data infrastructure to store and manage data, a high-speed connectivity to transport data, and a high-performance computer to process the data. So that's what's included in the European Cloud Initiative. So public authority need tools that can enable them to develop better evidence-based policy. The development of such policy needs to involve local actors, such as citizens and businesses. The data analytic and usage of cloud infrastructure to gain and to share this data can help improving policy making at all level, national but also local level. So what we want to use is the power of this cloud infrastructure to do some policy making in the field of e-government. Engaging citizens and local actors in the narration of data or in the analysis of big data and in its ethical issue can assist local governments. And the availability of open big data and as I said, in particular, the high-performance computer capability will offer will provide an infrastructure that help the public services to develop their policy. So the proposal should develop new ways and methods of using the cloud infrastructure for policy modeling, policy making, and policy implementation. They should create reusable models and should demonstrate the interoperability and scalability. In terms of impact, so the action will create analytic tools that enable public administration to reuse common infrastructure and data sets for the development of evidence-based policy. And we expect the engagement of citizens and businesses in a co-creation of the tool and therefore to enhance the trust in the authorities. Voilà, thank you.
I take the floor for the next one very rapidly because we are a little bit behind schedule. Number 13, digitization, digital single market, and European culture. New challenges for creativity, intellectual property rights, and copyright. It says that it contributes to the digital technologies focus area, of course, but please keep in mind that this is a very much social sciences and humanities topics. It is not about ICT development. It is about analyzing the impacts of important policy developments for ICT and the digital single market. You know that the whole policy framework is very much centered on big corporations, transportability of data and content, and especially on a few specific elements of cultural contents like music and films. And here we would like to invite the research community to look into the broader picture for the impact of digitization and the implementation of digital single market on cultural diversity, on access to culture, and on the creation of cultural value. So really, we give here and propose the opportunity to look into the different elements constituting the cultural sector, the different communities working in the field of culture, and look into those issues from a much closer, almost anthropological point of view, cultural anthropology point of view, but also the legal aspects, the economic aspects, the pedagogical skills development aspects are very important. So it is among the objectives to map the differences of IPR and copyright harmonizations between the different nation states, member states also, and associated countries, and to assess the importance of the digital single market for-profit, but also for the non-profit and mixed cultural and creative activities in Europe. And among the impacts of this research and innovation action, which once again has 9 million euro as a dedicated budget, so covering potentially 3 excellent projects, the fairer accessibility of digitized cultural goods and services is a very important objective regarding impacts, because you know, it's common sense that the digital sphere was conceived to enhance equality, social equality, but now we see how it becomes a place and a force that might also create new inequalities. And it is very important to look into this digital single market issue from this point of view of social fairness and accessibility of cultural goods and services. So we would also like to have, as a result, advice on appropriate levels of harmonization of copyright and IPR, and we hope that altogether these projects will contribute to the deepening of the digital single market. Thank you very much for your...
Thank you, Zoltan. Topic 14. This is a different kettle of fish. It's an Aranet co-fund renegotiating democratic governance in times of disruption. So this is funding for funders, or co-funding for funders. And we envisage to co-fund this with 3 million euros. As most of the topics under this call, this co-fund also responds to signs of, here called, disruptions of democracy. And the object is to form networks to enhance the understanding of the underlying dynamics and to propose means and instruments for sustainable and resilient democratic governance for the future. I do this very briefly. Here also, of course, the nature and the scale of the challenges should be considered, as well as the significance of rising inequalities, politics of threat, democratization of information, shifting identities, and the changing authority of institutions. Recent institutions, something more specific is worth mentioning here, is recent institutional developments, such as the introduction of the Spitzenkandidaten for the European elections, and indeed the proposal to join the presidency of the Commission with that of the European Council, should also be studied. Clearly, this Aranet co-fund will pool resources, should pool resources from participating states from all regions of Europe, including Southern, Central, and Eastern European countries. That's in the text. And just in case the suspected contenders are here, it is essential that proposals implement other joint activities, including additional joint calls without EU funding. That's a condition. As to the impact, the co-fund will engender effective transnational pan-European research networks and create European added value. We'll make recommendations on how democratic governance can be made more resilient and what interventions are needed. Okay, now I give the floor to my colleague Tobias, right next to me, for the final topic. Sorry.
Thanks very much, Yuri. I have the pleasure of presenting to you now in this big round the very last topic. I hope there's still plenty of energy in the room, and also that there are big appetites out there amongst our many viewers on the web stream. I'm going to present Governance 15, 2018, taking lessons from the practices of interdisciplinarity in Europe. So basically what we want to have is inputs from external experts on how to best address and improve interdisciplinarity in framework programs and beyond. The social sciences and humanities should not purely be a tool or an add-on to other projects. This should be avoided. So we want to make sure that SSH and the natural sciences and technology perform together on an equal footing. So the scope, in a way, is the practices and indicators of interdisciplinarity. What are the strengths and weaknesses of current practices in Horizon 2020 and beyond? We don't want to limit ourselves to the framework program, but national, bilateral, European, multilateral levels can be relevant. So what are the potential for strengthened interdisciplinarity in global societal challenges? Are there particularly suited areas for these terms of cooperation that need special attention? What can be the tools or solutions that are not in place today inside the EFP framework programs and of the EU and or outside it? The impact, the expected impact is actually contribution to the ongoing and future practices of interdisciplinarity. and then, as I mentioned, try to identify the particularly suited areas for more interdisciplinarity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, colleagues. We are almost in conformity with our agenda. You have been very patient. I'm sure that for each one of these 33 topics, you received clear and comprehensive information. We have for 2018 and 2019 two range of call for proposals. Calls for 2018 work program have been published, and don't forget the deadline is fixed on 13 March 2018. Calls for activities of 2019, and this is an indicative time schedule, will be published on 6 November 2018, and the deadline will be, at least for the time being, fixed on 14 March 2019. Yes, I repeat, 6 November 2018 publication and 14 March 2019 deadline for the activities of 2019. Globally, all these 33 topics will use 125 million euro for activities programmed in 2018 work program, and almost 144 million euro for those during 2019 work program. Now, I open questions from the audience, and I suggest to take two from each side of the room to respond immediately. I would like to invite you to use microphones if you do not have in proximity, and I open the questions. Great. Great, please.
Thank you very much for the information. I have a couple of questions for Migration 05. In the call, it mentions also about improving monitoring and data collection. So I wondered, because you didn't mention anything about that, if you can clarify a little bit what that means. It also mentions about include an ethnographic approach. Include an ethnographic approach. It is in the call. Does that mean that the whole project should be using ethnographic approach, or include also? And another question, you mentioned in the presentation that a comparative perspective with countries outside of the EU would be positive, but that is not included in the call. So my question is, will the evaluators know this information, and how is that going to work? Thank you.
Okay, Rafaela will take both questions.
I start from the end. Comparative perspective. It is indeed not compulsory. It is not a must, not an eligibility criteria. And yes, the evaluators know, because as you know, there are a set of keywords that are provided to the evaluators in order to also know how to read the topics. And indeed, this is one of the keywords that have been given, ethnographic approach. It doesn't mean that the whole setting of the proposal needs to have this ethnographic approach, but what we need is, what we wish to have is also an ethnographic approach, which means looking at local level, looking at involving actors, and looking at perspective from actors, informal, and as Monica stressed very well, also in informal education settings. The first question, can you please clarify what you...
Yes, so in the call, there is a sentence about improving also monitoring and data collection as the outcomes, one of the outcomes. And it wasn't clear from the call what that means. So I can... So this is in the expected impact.
in this field, we have a lot of research ongoing, a lot of actors, and we believe that we need synergies also for collecting the data, more clarity, more cooperation amongst the actors involved in this. So the project could play a role in this regard and try to propose ways to have consistent data and to make the actors collating data collaborating amongst each other.
Thank you very much. It was crystal clear, I'm sure about that. Everything was well understood. Do you have any other question? Do you need something to be explained or to give additional information to what you received? No. Great. Please.
A few words again about 05, but I think it was prevalent in other topics as well, about your perception of the idea of piloting. When you say pilots, how do you envisage the activity of piloting in a proposal which is mainly based on finding out information about what is going on and then drafting policy and recommendations? How does piloting position itself, and what kind of priority do you give to piloting in a proposal?
In the presentation, I stressed the importance to involve other stakeholders, not only researchers. It could be members of the community that work, for example, with migrant children, could be NGOs, the local actors mainly, the schools or actors involved in informal education. It is important to see what they are currently doing, what are the good practices that they are doing, see if innovative practices are already developed, see if it could be interesting to scale those up, and see whether could be proposed. Of course, in a research activity, could be a minor scale component. And this is also because we hope to be able in 2020 to have an additional call that should go more in this direction. But if you consider the impact that we expect from these calls or innovative practices, this should guide also the projects of next year to include new elements and go in this direction to see what could be proposed out of the research, out of the mapping, out of putting the relevant stakeholders together, what could be proposed involving the other actors. Something to add, Raffaella, on this?
Thank you, Monica. It was clear? Great. May I have any other question? Very well, I can... Oh, please.
Hello. My question is about the migration call for proposal. I don't remember exactly the topic, but it's about the returning people, I mean deported people. Is possible including in this area for analysis area are no priority now? I mean, for example, Latin American area?
Indeed, the answer is yes. In several topics, you have seen that the issue of return that is under the overall umbrella of governing the phenomenon of migration, and it is very high in the political agenda, is included, and therefore, indeed, you can look at it in all possible vertical and horizontal directions. So forcibly return, voluntary return, spontaneous return towards destinations that are explicitly mentioned in existing directive and communication from the institutions or that have been covered in the past. So there will be forecast to be covered in the future. So indeed, there is no geographical restriction.
I will take a fourth and last question, and then we will move to the presentation on mid-term evaluation process, which will be performed by my colleague Basudeb Chaudhuri. Last question. I don't force you. No question? Good. Crystal clear. I would invite my of the midterm evaluation process.
Thank you very much, Marita. I had the privilege of being involved in this interim evaluation of the H2020 program in our unit, Open and Inclusive Societies. Obviously, my responsibility was to work on this part. All this is now published since the month of July. There was, first of all, the Lamy report, which I'll be talking about. I won't be saying too much about it. And the evaluation of Societal Challenge 6 is in, well, I should have written it down, but I did not. It's in what's called the staff working document on the website of the Commission. There are 3 staff working documents that accompany the Lamy report, or the high-level expert group report, as it's called, and these staff working documents run into almost 1,300 pages. So it's a lot of material, and our part, the SC6 part, is actually between page 949 and page 999, to be very precise. Okay, so that's for the detail. Why isn't this working? Now, so this is the context in which this interim evaluation was carried out. The interim evaluation is done in order to judge which way a program running over a 6 to 7 year span is going, and whether it needs correction or not. Now, the idea of this interim evaluation was to see overall how it fitted in with the multiple objectives of the Commission. The Societal Challenge 6 was, as you remember its title, Europe in a Changing World, Inclusive, Innovative and Reflective Societies. The idea was to respond to the crisis that had started in 2007-2008, and which was certainly carrying on well beyond the FP7 period. So it was what's called the European Union 2020 strategy, and this specific Societal Challenge 6 scores high on what might call relevance, because it addressed 7 of the 10 political priorities that came out of the agenda of President Juncker, which he had set out in 2014 when he took over. So these were the 7 priorities, as you can see, covering growth, jobs, investment, the single market, a deeper and fairer union, justice and fundamental rights, and the question of trust, which my colleague Yuri raised, migration, Europe in the world, Europe as a global actor, and democratic change, along with several other flagships that we won't be going into. The idea of open science, open innovation, and research system that's open to the world, the innovation union, mobility of the youth, new skills in jobs, training, poverty, and so on. Now, the European Commission has, let's say, a grammar of arguments which are based on 5 criteria: relevance, coherence, effectiveness, efficiency, I'll define the term shortly, and European value added. So the utility of any program, in fact, of every euro that's being spent, really has to respond to these 5 criteria. That's the basic idea. I have around 15 to 18 minutes or so?
You have as long as you want.
Okay, thank you, that's very nice. I'll try to be briefer. Okay, so, excuse me. So let's take up relevance first. Now, this is probably where the areas covered by Societal Challenge 6 score the most, because in the way the program was designed over these 2-year spans, and this last span that we are in that is going to cover 3 years, there has been a continuous attempt to reply to new challenges coming up. The migration challenge was arriving when this framework program had started. Others came in. There was Brexit. There were the American elections. There was, of course, the problems of disruptive technologies and globalization that we have seen in the presentation this morning. So these were all rolling onto the agenda, and in the way that the program was presented, even in 2016-17 as compared to 14-15, and currently as you've been seeing today, this continuous attempt to evolve was something that marked the way that the work was being done. Okay, so this, I mean, this is not. Let me be how to put it, maybe not politically correct. It's not a question of being auto-congratulatory. Every argument given here is based on evidence, on extensive evidence, on an extensive public stakeholder consultation on which many of you participated. So every sentence literally that's written in this document is supposed to be evidence-based. Okay. So I needed to state that. Now, I won't go over every line of the agenda. As you can see it, 2014-15 really tried to pick up the aftermath of the crisis, of the 2007-8 economic and financial crisis that was still making waves, and from which, of course, Europe in general, but the rest of the world was having difficulty pulling out. The question of, in a situation where the average unemployment rate of European youth was well over 20%, except for just one or two countries. The problems of youth unemployment were absolutely critical. There was the question of cultural heritage, of identity, conflicts around identity, the question of managing diversity. These were questions that, it's not as if they were new in Europe, but they were being faced in new dimensions, precisely in terms of the aftermath of the crisis. So all these were coming in, and also positive things which have been presented by our colleagues from DG Connect. Everything that came along with the arrival of the digital world, of everything that's being called digital disruptive technologies, had many positive elements also in the way we consume, in the way we live, in the way we produce. So all these elements also came on board to be studied. So carrying on, these new words that became buzzwords in Commission jargon, like co-creation, of course, inclusiveness is a reflection, these were there. Then came another set of crises, and this was in 2014 and 15, starting with the terrorist crisis that hit France, and at their request, there were a series of questions that related to radicalization, violent conflict, extremism that came on board, not just specifically oriented towards one particular problem, but in a larger and a more general way. You laid out some of them this morning and in the way they were addressed. So these were critical questions that came on board over this entire period. Again, with changing focus. Some of them focused on immediate short-term problems, focusing on needs of stakeholders. For example, the interior ministries of the member states and DG Home. They were to do with security, but they also had more long-term dimensions that were studied from the point of social science and humanities, like studying the question of identity, change, and cultural diversity as Europe evolves. So both the short, medium, and long-term dimensions were covered in what was being done over these framework programs. So since I said that this was a major point, this relevance is something on which I think the entire NC6 program scored very strongly. Then comes the question of coherence. Now, this is probably slightly more difficult to understand from outside the Commission. The idea is to see that all the instruments, the tools, the way the programs are designed, that they match each other in terms of objectives, in terms of the efficiency of the money used. As I said, every euro has to count, and if possible, multiply in terms of the impact, even though social impacts or cultural impacts are not easily measurable, but they have to be taken into account. So the idea, first of all, were to take into account these intertwined dimensions of inclusion, innovation, and looking at the past in order to draw lessons for the future. And as you know, there are a variety of instruments that are laid out: research and innovation actions, coordination and support actions, the SME instruments, which strongly invited companies of different dimensions to work with the research community, and especially the SSH community, came in. So these were some of the internal objectives that were laid out. In terms of external objectives, SE6 priorities were linked to some of the main EU policies, as you know, as we have laid out again today: migration, jobs, growth, the digital single market, which is an important objective of the coming year, of the coming years. EU as a global actor, obviously its place in the world, that was right there in 2014, and so on. Then comes the question of effectiveness, that is, how well are the topics, the programs, enabling certain important objectives to be achieved. That happens through the involvement of stakeholders, including policymakers and CSOs. I'm not going to inundate you with data, but I do have 3 or 4 slides of data coming up, and I'll try to highlight what the important points are. Again, I repeat that all this data is publicly available on the websites of the Commission. Again, to come back to effectiveness, the design of the topics helped also, for example, within migration to tackle the refugee crisis, within governance to raise the Brexit issue, and so on. Efficiency. Now, efficiency is really, in the economic sense of the term, to do with the use of resources. In that sense, even though the budget of SC6 is relatively modest as compared to the globality of the program, I think we can claim that it is efficient in the sense that that, as I've been trying to point out on the previous slides, they enable us to respond to a fairly large number of objectives, which were social, political, and economic objectives. The first point. Secondly, is the smallest funded theme. However, it addresses, as I pointed out from the first slides, 7 major issues of the Juncker agenda through many different areas and disciplines. Some of the problems, as you know, again, it's very often a question of the glass being half empty or half full, if I may put it that way. The success rate has been among the lowest in the societal challenges just because of what's called the oversubscription problem. In fact, we've been in this situation which has created a lot of heartbreak and anguish that projects were being rejected at 14, 14.5, and even 15. I mean, so these were some of the problems, but since I'd say the last 1 or 2 years and into 2018, the volume of the number of calls have been squeezed, and the number of projects also, in order to have more money per call and in the topics, precisely in order to address this problem. The 2-stage evaluation process was tested. It creates some problems. So right now, if I'm not mistaken, in this current series, they're all 1-stage evaluations. Okay? EU added value. This is a very important point. The idea is that the EU should not be duplicating, again, both in the interest of overall efficiency and resource use, duplicating what is already well done at the level of the member states or even below. Excuse me, I've been forgetting to change the slides. You should have told me. That was not very clever.
No, we need a screen in front of us, otherwise
yeah, exactly.
You have to survey both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Very sorry.
We can perform better next
okay.
time.
Thanks, Monica. Yeah. Okay, so EU added value comes into the following question. So effectiveness is the pan-European nature of the projects, the fact that the research programs enable the construction of major European networks, and as we can see, there are consortiums that grew up during FP6 and FP7 that are carrying on in H2020. That's precisely the dimension, and upscaling, that's another favorite term in Commission jargon, that is sought to be brought about. Efficiency, as I told you, having comparative studies, and of course synergy, for example, in stimulating fields, a topic that is currently under discussion, such as social innovation, which needs high standards of creativity and interaction. Okay, some figures. Well, the important one here, okay, now this time I'll get it up. I'm going. Yeah. Now, the line that concerns us is the SC6 line. And as you can see, and this is the topic that, for example, in the program committee raised a lot of discussion, 64% of projects would not have been financed in the form that they were prepared if European financing does not exist. In the different columns, you find answers as to, in different areas, as to what would have gone ahead. In topics that are heavily hard science or applied science basis, the possibility of fundings are larger and hence the possibilities of doing at least some things are larger. And that's what this table shows, okay, if you study it closely. Then I'll just carry on. This is, okay, sorry. This one, sorry, I jumped to table. I'll go back one table. Yeah. This is to do with the comparative position of the major countries that have been either in terms of number of participants or in terms of number of coordinators or in terms of the total amount of EU grants obtained. The positions have not changed, as you can see. There's 1, 2, 3. Just the first 3 countries are marked here. It's UK, Germany, and Netherlands in the particular context of SC6. Now, there are a lot of tables of this type for all the challenges and also in a regrouped way. It is interesting, I think, in the context of the NCPs and what Nest for Society does, to study the geography of success in Europe and to try to draw lessons on it. I mean, so it's one point that I'd like to raise. Okay, the third one, this is to do with the type of organizations. PRC is private organizations, REC are research organizations, then public organizations, other than educational organizations. HES is higher education, basically universities, and OTH is all others, for example, associations, etc. Here, now the interesting thing is, now again, this is really a question of the glass being half empty or half full. In H2020 as compared to FP7, you see an evolution of a wider variety of participation and private entities, other institutions, even the public sector increasing its share of the pie. But it is, however, coming at the share of the universities and the research organizations. As you can see, the share of the university sector goes down from 47 to 35, and that of research from 29 to 18. Now, when people see this, now obviously there's a negative reaction, but again, it is also increasing the capacity of the research community, of the, let's say, the stricto sensu research community, to work with other stakeholders. So you have to take both into account to have a balanced picture, but this is certainly a figure that does tend to upset people a bit, particularly people in the community that we have as stakeholders. Just a remark. Huh? Lamy report. I'll finish in another 3 minutes. Well, from the evidence gathered, the Lamy report has stated that H2020 is a success. Pardon, excuse me. Oops, sorry. Is a success, and the priority laid on research and innovation should continue to be the foundations of the growth strategy. It's the idea that it's the creativity of an economy, of the people of Europe, that should be at the foundations of what creates its future growth. Okay, so that's a basic idea, and basically a simple and acceptable idea. Well, since H2020 is considered to be a success, it's going to be an evolution rather than a revolution in the movement towards FP9. So this was stated by both Commissioner Moedas and the Lamy Group at the presentation on 3rd July this year. Okay. Second point. There will be an evolution from what are called societal challenges to what is being called a mission-oriented approach. Now, the missions are not yet defined. They should be defined, or rather they will be defined from the stakeholder consultation, which hopefully will mobilize you massively. That will be from the month of December up to the month of March. Okay? So this is important, and I'll just go back 1 second on the previous slide, the last sentence, that the idea is that the approach should be citizen-centric. This is, of course, this was there in the previous, it's not as if it wasn't there, but this has been particularly stressed, that it's important to bring science and innovation closer to the citizen, and how to bring that about is, of course, very present there everywhere where one talks about impact, but it will continue to be a major thrust, including in the way that impact is going to be measured, which is something that obviously the work at the Commission has already started on that. Okay? Sorry. So, work on FP9 has already started informally. It's informally formal work because it can't start formally before the MFF, the famous multi-annual financial framework, has been voted. This public consultation is important, and it's particularly important because it will help you to play a role in defining what the missions can be, particularly from the point of view of Societal Challenge 6 and the social, political, cultural, economic dimensions that we need to address. Okay? So to conclude, Societal Challenge 6 is considered to be strong on relevance. However, the priority needs to be continue to be redefined. Greater collaboration between the programs of the EU, of course, is a continuous effort. The integration of countries that at times seem to be not fully integrated, but I think that is less and less so if one sees the statistics in evolution. The rate of entry of EU13 or EU Southern Europe countries has been rather good in the current program in the last 3 years. And the EU value added from the evidence provided seems to be substantial. Finished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. It might appear to be a complex landscape, but in reality it is not. As usually, the European Community prepares the so-called multi-annual financial framework. What is that? It's just a frame in which the policies with targeted objectives and expected impacts are designed, and the allocation of resources, both in terms of financial resources and human resources for the execution. The implementation of these policies are also agreed, and this is the basis to design afterward all details of all other sectorial policies. Usually, what happens is that this MFF, as we call it, a multi-annual framework, financial framework, should be first decided by the Commission, and just afterward the thematic policies to be published. This will happen this time also for the next 7 years period. The decision of the Commission on MFF is expected for May 2018. Very few timing afterward, all the thematic policies, including research and innovation policy, will be also endorsed by the Commission and will open the start of formal discussions with the two policy authorities of the European Communities, which are the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament. The targeted objective is to timely adopt the final 9th framework program, as we call it now, and to start implementation from 1st of January 2021. And in this frame, of course, this mid-term evaluation of Horizon 2020 is not just a legal, mandatory task of the Commission. It is much more than that. Understand how the implementation serve the designed objectives and the expected impacts from the beginning, how plasticity allows the European Union to respond constantly to evolving situations. For example, we have security and defense, as my colleagues explained before, and these are the first is an old policy, but with emerging new requirements. The second one is a very new design of a very new at the European Community level policy. Research and innovation can offer and will be at the first range of priorities quite a lot, and we have to jump inside. Societal Challenge 6 is very much active in security and defense research, and our unit is the unit which coordinates the work in DGRTD for these two policy priorities. This was just to say to you that the European Commission is now preparing the 9th framework program. Discussions will take place soon as we have some finalized draft documents with all stakeholders, starting from program committees and representatives of member states, but it will be not limited only to them, in order to be sure that we have a global and visionary policy design. And for the next 6 to 7 months, this will become most probably one of the key issues of discussion. Now, I would like to open the questions session in case you want we provide you more explanation or more detailed information on some concerns related to the mid-term assessment and forthcoming activities. Very good. Vasudeb, you are crystal clear. Thank you very much. Congratulations. I will invite my colleague Tobias Badestorm, who will provide you a very original monitoring report on the way social sciences and humanities have been integrated in Horizon 2020 activities. Please, Tobias.
Thank you, Marita. So I'm going to talk about the integration of social science and humanities in Horizon 2020 with a special focus of our monitoring report. So I will try to be quick as we want time in between here and the brokerage event. So this is just to have a recap on our unit, B6, Open and Inclusive Societies. The main areas is, of course, the coordination of Societal Challenge 6 and the integration of social sciences across Horizon 2020, and these are some of the selected policy areas that we deal with. So just to have it clear, so the difference from FP7 to Horizon 2020, there was a program dedicated to SSH. Now we have Societal Challenge 6, which is not a purely SSH program, but has a majority of topics that are highly SSH intensive. And what was new in Horizon 2020 was also the part of interdisciplinarity in the excellence criteria. So very in short, what are we talking about in practice when we want to integrate social sciences and humanities alongside technology and natural sciences? Topics are flagged for SSH when they're relevant. As much as 41% in pillars 2 and 3 were flagged in 16-17. And we don't have the official figures yet for 2018 to 20. But I've had, let's say, a short look, and it seems like there are increases in at least many of the work program parts. I'm also happy to see that, in my opinion, from 16 to 17 to 18 to 20, there are more topics in almost all of the work program parts where SSH has a large role, let's say, in the project. The evaluation panels, of course, are asked to look at interdisciplinarity when they are evaluating these projects. And what it means, of course, is that those topics flagged for SSH should have meaningful integrated contributions from SSH researchers and SSH aspects alongside those other objectives of the topics in question. So now more technically, the monitoring report, it was published, the last one we have was published in February 2017 based on 2015 numbers. So there is, of course, a delay there because it takes time to get all those data and then to analyze those. It's important that we're only talking about those topics in pillars 2 and 3 that are flagged as relevant for SSH. So some of the key findings is that under the SSH flag topics, around 22% of the budget goes to SSH partners. And that's a decent result, let's say. But then keep in mind that for all those approximately 60% topics that are not flagged for SSH, we don't know. This would be a very big job to find out. But maybe around 5% go to the SSH partners, but this is just a total guess. In terms of the countries represented, they tend to be the big countries in Western Europe. But that's a bit the similar pattern, I would say, compared to the rest of Horizon 2020. But what is a bit more worrying that amongst the coordinators of those topics under SSH flag topics, they have as much as almost 75% coming from I think the 6 biggest countries. So I encourage also smaller and medium-sized countries from all over Europe and beyond, for that matter, to take the role as coordinator and at least try this. There is, of course, a fact that some disciplines do better than others. I don't think this is very surprising, but still it has something, we have to do something with this in the coming years. So the budget going to SSH partners, I'm happy to announce that SC6 is the single biggest source for SSH partners to get funding. But of course, if you add all the others together, they have a bigger number of funding to the SSH researchers, which shows that there are large opportunities across Horizon 2020 for real SSH integration alongside other sciences. Societal Challenge 6 is the biggest one, and then you have ICT, and then SC1 Health and SC4 Transport. Of course, here we also have to keep in mind that ICT and health are the 2 biggest areas when it comes to the funding or available funding, so it's not so surprising that they are in the lead here. 2015 was a particularly good year for transport. When it comes to what are the, let's say, best performance out there in the work program part related to our methodology, is that SC6 does the best in terms of those 4 indicators we have. I'm not going to go into detail of the report. You can read it yourself. And after SC6, you have SC4 Transport, SC7 Security, and SC1 Health performing very well according to what we have looked at in our report. But this is, of course, varying very much from year to year. And it's not an aim at all that all the work program parts are performing the same. It is a fact that some societal challenges and the leadership enabling technologies, some have more need of SSH aspects than others. So the lesson so far is that even though this has been an improvement from 2014 to 15, 20% of the projects fail to integrate contributions from the SSH, meaning that according to our methodology, these projects have practically no SSH aspects or disciplines involved. So we have to make this better by doing these 3 things: designing better interdisciplinary topics, open up topics to underrepresented SSH disciplines, as I mentioned, and then, of course, because, of course, the NCPs and the applicants have a large responsibility here, better inform and mobilize the SSH community. Speaking of which, I really have to thank Net4 Society for the close cooperation on SSH integration. It's very valuable for us. So here are some selected questions that the evaluators may have when they are looking at topics flagged for SSH. It might seem trivial, but Of course, the evaluators are looking at a lot of dimensions, so 3 main criterias, and you have to realize that there are, related to the legal text, up to 14 cross-cutting issues that also deserve attention, and very many cases, of course, for example, SMEs, innovation, European research area, gender, international cooperation, and social science and humanities may be relevant for the same topic. So it's not an easy task, but of course we are working to improve this evaluation system. I'm almost coming to an end here. I want to mention these success stories in SSH integration. This is a brochure made by Net4Society again, and the brochures I think you can find at the end, at the back of the room there. Here I've looked through various work program parts for 2018 to 20. And as I mentioned, there are quite many topics with a range of references to SSH aspects, questions, and involvement. Some topics are very explicit, inviting SSH contributions throughout, while others foresee a limited but still important SSH involvement. Of course, the challenge we often have alongside the thematic services is to make the balance right when it comes to which topics should be flagged and not. Some are very obvious, and some maybe should not have been flagged, but then, of course, we run the risk of advisors, SSH researchers missing out on a topic because we have found that it's not relevant for SSH. So the flagging system has obvious weaknesses, but it's a very good help for the advisors, researchers, NCPs. So I hope you understand that. This is kind of, if you are new to interdisciplinarity, the ABC page on SSH integration. So you'll find a list of SSH disciplines, guidance for applicants, guidance for evaluators, and a list of SSH flag topics. Of course, in the European Commission, we need input from the outside world. So if you see that these descriptions are not the way you would have phrased it, we are happy to take suggestions on that for further use. I mentioned the monitoring report. The aim is to publish it every year. We will see if we can do that in the next coming years, because it is, of course, a fact that when we do it every year, the differences may not be as large because we're talking about the same work program, but that is to be seen. Net4Society provides analysis of SSH flag topics, and this is very useful to see which topics across the board of work program parts have SSH aspects and elements that should be looked into. I think also Net4Society is working on the work program 18 to 20 as we speak.
It should be ready by the end of the month, the document.
That's very nice, thank you. That was everything I had, thank you.
Thank you very much, Tobias. It is an extraordinary and very rich work because it helps us to understand the changing way of considering problems. I mean the European Community Policy on Research and Innovation, we move from technical views and solutions to global and societal views. And this requires not only interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approaches, but more than that, transdisciplinary approaches in order to understand very complex phenomena and to set up a policy scenario in an anticipative way. Do you have any question which concern the Tobias presentation or any other presentation which took place in the morning session of our conference? Please do not hesitate. Very good. Please.
Sorry, I have another one for 05 migration. And sorry. And that links the question that my colleague asked about the pilots and the response. So in the call, it mentions policy on the one hand and best practice. But the way I understood the call was that this was mainly research that will have implications for policy rather than policy and a little bit of research. So would you be able to clarify?
Oh, you have understood. Research with impact on policy through the recommendation that we'll issue. But what we were trying to answer is that when we say involving non-academic actors, involving practitioners, it also means that we not only ask you to look at their practices, but to maybe study new practices, to envisage how these practices can then in the future be scaled up or be used in other contexts. So this is the invitation we're trying to making, not just looking at, but involving and thinking forward.
If I may add, you have seen in this topic, you have a huge number of possible aspects and actors that you can take into account. It is for you to choose the right mix of aspects and try to convince in your proposal that you propose something innovative that tackles the problem appropriately, maybe part of the problem, not too narrow, but considering the many aspects. And also, in this regard, coming back to your previous questions that you had on the inclusion of actors outside the EU, well, of course, it is not in the text of the call. International cooperation or comparison with other parts of the world are always welcome in our projects. And here the idea would be that we are addressing a problem that may be already occurred in other parts of the world. If relevant for your proposals, you should only also have a look at other practices outside. So it cannot be the core of the proposals, but if appropriate, the inclusion of the analysis of other practices outside Europe is welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking from a little bit distance to the microphone, so I'm sorry. Isabella Grabowska from Poland. Thank you very much for this very informative meeting. I have a question about the evaluation procedure. Because all the work program, the work put in it and the preparations are very knowledge and work intense. That's also on our side, scholars. We put a lot of effort to prepare applications. Have you ever considered to include into a Societal Challenge 6 double-stage evaluation, not a single-stage evaluation? And second thing, have you ever considered blind review on any stage of it? Because we see that as scholars, as applicants, the effort which we put not necessarily always equals with the quality of evaluation we get. I'm sorry for saying that, but I think it's also right forum to say something from our side. So I think that double-stage review would enhance the quality on both sides and also eliminate weaker applicants and will allow to enhance the quality of the review. Thank you very much.
I will be happy to tackle this question, and I would like to underline two things. The first is to not confuse the quality of the evaluation and the selection rate. We are very much unhappy when we see excellent proposals which rate very high scores not being selected because of budget constraints. Despite the fact that Horizon 2020 has a very increased budget compared to FP7, we went broadly from 55 to 80 billion euro for the same 7 years period. In most of our activities, we have a very low selection rate when compared to FP7. And this creates problems. This is not related to the quality of the evaluation. The selection rate is related essentially to the available budget. Now, the quality of the evaluation we don't understand, and we have a very deep experience since the second framework program, I would say 1989, on evaluation. So we have not seen any evidence that a double stage or multiple stage evaluation gives better results than one stage evaluation. In this program, Societal Challenge 6, we use individual evaluations. So we take more than the necessary number of experts, which are 3 per proposal. This is the minimum. We take more. We take into consideration the multiple dimensions of each one of the topics. If dimensions are in numerous experts who are skilled for each one of these dimensions will be involved. We have consensus reports which are centrally organized, which means that the whole staff of our units and services is working long weeks to make sure that moderations for consensus report will be properly done. We have observers, and not only one, who attest that everything has been done not properly, but with a very high professional spirit. We don't see why evaluation suffer, and somebody who has any concern of evaluation, I would invite him and her to send to us, starting by me, an email with concerns. We have no errors, we have no problems, but we have, once again, and this has been discussed, very low success rates. Of course, we are frustrated when we have proposals scoring 14.5 out of 15, which have not been selected. And of course, we understand very well all participants to these proposals and coordinators' frustration, because what they have to do more to improve the proposal, it is not a question of improving the proposal. The problem comes either from the very low budget which might have been allocated to the item, or perhaps, and we have to think about that, the need to design policy priorities which are, by parts of the work program, narrow or more narrow to avoid this kind of useless process. Once again, it is not the quality of the evaluation which score proposals which are not selected 14.5 out of 15. Do you have any other question? Please.
Yeah, I'm Anne Singleton from the University of Bristol. I've worked inside the European Commission. I've worked with DG Research from a policy DG, and from a university I've been an applicant and an evaluator. And I think that you really need to consider, if I can respectfully put it, the point being made about a two-stage evaluation. The amount of resources that go in both from the Commission end and from the applicant's end. It's absolutely draining on everybody's time and all the efforts that go in across the whole of Europe for work that could be better put, our energies could be better put into excellence in research and excellence in administration. So I think there's no question about the quality of the evaluation itself, but it's the actual absorption of all these resources and time and effort, which is so draining and could be put, all our energies could be put to better effect collectively.
Thank you for the question. This gives me the opportunity to underline that for each one of the solutions which are privileged, we have advantages and inconvenience. Double-stage evaluation means double-stage submission. Okay? We will receive light proposals. We will provide evaluation for some of the criteria. We will pre-select proposals, and we will continue with the true submission of the proposals. It will take a very long period. the selection will not respond to the time to contract, which is the key concern for Horizon 2020. We promised and we try to do it, and for societal challenge it is fully achieved that 8 months time to contract will be used. Of course, I recognize that the best enemy of good is better. And we can always improve the systems, but it should be underlined that we have some limits. And above these limits, more we invest resources, both financial and human, less we have increase of results. If we adopt another policy, we have to face and to accept other inconvenience. If you have 12 and 13 and 14 months for the same quality of evaluation, for a time to contract, nobody will be happy with that. And we will not be in a position to pull important activities, to use flexibility, and to be in a position to open new chapters of research. We are very much open-minded. We have analyzed the evaluation. We are very much convinced for the interest of societal challenge 6 that one-step call for proposals, one-step evaluation is the best condition, and we try to give all the quality which is necessary, all the attention, and all our forces to make it working properly. We are a very self-committed team. My colleagues, Monica, Rafaela, Alina, Patrick, Zoltan, Georgios, Basudep, Marnix, Yuri, Mikhail, Tobias, and myself. We invested all our morning to be with you, to explain, to try to make sure that we have the same understanding to respond to questions, and we will tackle all these evaluations with the same passion to be sure that everybody, all proposals will be treated with equity and quality. And I'm sure that evaluation results will not suffer from these ways of doing. REA colleagues are very much self-committed. They are working hard, very closely to us. They perform a very high-end talented management of both evaluations and management of proposals, and we try together to give satisfaction to all these requirements. Do you have any other question before I thank you formally and on behalf of my colleagues and myself for your interest to our activities? The last question I will take from the floor, please.
Thank you again. I think I can understand rather well the idea for involving to another kind of organization, not typical research organization, I mean public organization or stakeholder about the public policies or NGO, private organization. But my question is, even I can imagine involve this kind of organization for make a proposal could be possible, including in the social policies, or for example, in immigrant area, in the social policies, in the public policies. But even more, it's possible organize some kind of the workshop or seminar, but not only for involve, for take and consider, even for validate, for example, some proposal that you get in your project, validate like real proposal for including in the public policy. For example, for any organization in the public area working in the integration, education integration for children, for example. Or no, or this is more design the public policies. What is the border?
May I give? I will give you a general answer. We provide research. Yeah, our activities are research-driven. You might include stakeholders who will be contributive towards the objectives of the activities. You can validate scenarios if you go to implement policy scenarios under real conditions. This is what we call in hard sciences piloting processes. You try to see what is the responsiveness degree when you apply a policy scenario under real conditions. Yes, this can be done in a very frontier limit. When you go to implement the policy scenarios which have been produced under real conditions outside of the research effort, this is not research and innovation activity. This can be in the frame of another policy. It might be migration policy for the activities of your interest. It might be security policy. It might be defense policy. But it is not certainly research and innovation. In some cases, in these policies, migration or security or defense and so on and so forth, you might have a minor component of applied research in a very big frame of non-research driven. In this case, in most of the cases, the project is driven in these policies, not in the research. Okay? We speak about the frontier, which makes a project, a research project, or application of research results. We do not provide application of research results outside of this research. But we can, of course, validate approaches inside the project whilst we perform research to finalize the projects.
Almost in the border with the design of the new policies.
Like piloting, you have a theory, you have research results, you try to apply them under real conditions. You have always to get adapted to the responsiveness of the system. Never it will fit 100% because you have so many variable parameters which have not been taken simultaneously, all of them into consideration in your system establishment, and then you have to adapt your system to the reality. This is the reason we encourage for several of our topics to involve stakeholders who are not researchers by themselves, who are not specialists in innovation, but who will give to researchers and innovators in some few cases the answer to the right response. What we think and what happens in the field under real conditions is not 100% equivalent and mirror situation. Okay? Thank you. For your interest to this activity, which has been demonstrated by your patience, we are in a meeting since 9:20, and very few people left the meeting room. The meeting for Net for Society will start according to the agenda at 2 o'clock. You will have the possibility to have the lunch and to have some networking activities from now until 2 o'clock. Thank you very much and have a nice afternoon.